has to be a spruce. Picea is the spruce family. So. And it's also Picea abies.
Righto.
Picea abies, the Norway spruce. Not actually found in Norway, but never mind. And the origin of the history?
Dug it up 2 years ago. It's just been sat in the pot.
And have you thought about a shape? You must have looked at the tree and thought about. There's an awful lot of tree for a relatively.
I would imagine it's going to get thinned out quite a bit today. I'd like to just start getting the idea of where we're going to go with it. I quite like this, the base.
As always, our first decision is where we're going to look at it from.
Yeah,
there are a few places that are pretty near impossible to look at it from here, and it's pretty nearly impossible to look at it from here. So we've either got here or we've got here, and my initial reaction is exactly what Ben said. You know, that's a possible front, but it's not nearly as good as this as the front. We don't need to say, right, well, the front is going to be here, boom, here. All we need to say is that our front is going to be somewhere in that section and there, and that gives us enough of a reference point to make all our decision. The first thing that strikes me about this is that the whole spreading nature of the tree is really quite attractive. So, you know, the tree has that characteristic all on its own. So do we necessarily want to try and change that completely? And my reaction is probably not. I mean, there are lots of different options. You know, we can make a very small tree out of this with using one or two elements of this thing. I can visualize maybe a beautiful tree with just the two elements that my hand's on, and these bits gone, or just a short bit of deadwood on them.
Yeah.
That's one option. We can keep pretty much the whole thing, but thin it out. We could keep this whole spreading look to the tree. That could be really quite attractive. You know, for a lot of people, this branch extending away out the back of the side might be seen as just making the whole image too big. I don't know. It doesn't really to me. I like, the slightly unusual look to this big, broad spreading thing. And I'm really a bit reluctant to go down the road of making the whole thing too small. I mean, ludicrously almost, we could go with just this bit as the tree. We could go from this trunk up into this. We could make a beautiful small tree from that. But are we making the absolute best? The only problem with this bit that my hand is on, it's very, very heavy relative to everything else we've got. We're already at midday, so we won't go talking on too much. It depends how far you want to go yourself with this. I mean, this is really an instance where, it'd be interesting to hear Ian's input and my input, but I also really want to know what you'd like to see in the tree. So
I like the spreading habit of it. I don't want to fight against it. If it's gonna make life easier for me working on it by going with what it wants to do naturally, then I'd say stick with that. I could see deadwood being worked into it. I haven't really decided. I thought making it smaller, but if you think we can keep it larger, then great.
Well, we could start off today by getting rid of a few ugly bits. I'm pretty certain. I have a lot of experience with spruce, and if this was my tree back at the nursery and I see this lovely growth you've got, I'm pretty certain that all this beautiful growth is not coming from just these two roots here. These two roots are really not adding, they're not contributing greatly, they're quite the opposite. I would have no qualms whatsoever about cutting this here and here. I'm not going to interfere with it. I'm quite happy to cut these off and leave the dead root in. Dead roots that rot away quietly on their own, in my experience, do not affect the healthy roots left in the root ball. I'm not somebody who worries about cutting this bit off and leaving what bit of root is now going to die and rot away. that very rarely has an adverse impact on healthy roots in the root ball. So some things like this, we can cut them away, leave the bit that's in the ground without disturbing everything else. We can look at 1 or 2 bits like that. Then we might just simply look at what we can achieve by shortening all this long extended growth. And then we can maybe look at, you know, whether we really, you know, what's on the end of this. This is, for me, this is the most problematic part of the tree, where my hand is. It's so big and heavy, it's very pipe-like, there's no tapering between that there and there.
Okay.
But there's an awful lot on that. We may need to live with that and try to obscure it some way or draw the eye away from it. But otherwise, I think we would keep, you know, there's a bit that's crossing, but there's nothing on it. So we can have a... One? No.
Huh?
What do you, I thought you were worried about the fact that I was rabbiting on and we're running out of
I'm
time.
always worried about that.
So I'm sure we make a lot of progress. You're definitely not going to get to a point where you can start sticking wire on this tree today, but
No.
I'm pretty certain you don't want to do that. So.
Just
Has anybody else
starting
got any ideas about the tree? No?
What about changing the...
Well, that's another thing. You know, we haven't even thought about that. You know, we could maybe. I think we end up with too many cascades from this kind of material, but it's certainly an option. But then it's not a brilliant option.
I was thinking the other way actually, you know.
Oh, you were thinking the other way?
Use the trunk. They used to have
Well,
the
you
trunk.
know, maybe that's an option. You know, then we could maybe keep this as the main trunk and maybe lose all this. And I mean, this is a bit of a problem, this one here, because we've got very little before anything happens. I could see a bit of deadwood here, whether we'd change the inclination or not. The trouble with changing the inclination is that then you disturb what is a kind of a reasonable surface rootage that's quite nicely anchored visually to the surface of the soil at the moment. So, but sometimes that can be such an advantage to change the inclination that we're probably better off sacrificing some other elements that we would otherwise want to keep. So.
I was thinking of actually saving the heavy trunk, you know. The heavy
Yeah, well, actually, you're right. Actually, you're right that changing inclination this way is a way of actually utilising better the heavy part of the trunk, really. So, but we might look at that. We might sometimes, if Ben decides with Ian and I, perhaps that maybe this element here is just too ugly to use, then. If we just first of all remove that and gin the bit that's left, then we can re-look at the whole thing and see it in a bit of a different light. So I think we'll probably do that. So
awesome.
Right, let's make a start. Has everybody got something they can get on with?